Welcome back. Hit subscribe, ring the bell, and follow me at DirtleMTG on Twitter to keep up to date with the most recent videos and other posts. You can help support this content by hitting like and share, and by checking out the links in the description below. Alright, it's time to dirtle. Hello. Today we visit the battlefield through the eyes of Garna Bloodfist of Keld. Daring to challenge a Keldan on the battlefield are Krenko mob boss, Reaper King, and Lazav Dimir mastermind. Reaper wins the die roll and begins the game with a mystic monastery. Lazav plays a dismal backwater, gaining 1 life. I draw a Zulaport Cutthroat, and then summon the most angry baby chick ever born. All hail the Phoenix Chick, and I swing into the Krenko player for 1 and first blood. Krenko starts their own game with a stained glass mountain into play. To the Reaper, and a Plains enters the battlefield. They cast a Felwar Stone afterward and pass. Lazav drops an island. My turn draws me a Shriekmaw, and I play a Snow Swamp. Then I cast Zulaport Cutthroat. I'll mention here that all of my basics are snow. Off to combat, and I swing the Angry Bird into the Reaper player, dealing 1. Krenko has another mountain into play. Scroll Rack then comes down. Reaper plays a Vivid Creek and passes. Lazav drops a Swamp, and then they cast a Nightveil Spectre. My turn nabs me a mountain. I play it and cast Yahenni. I move to attacks and swing the Angry Bird at Krenko since Lazav has a blocker. Back to the mob boss, and a mountain hits the field. Goblin Sledder is then summoned. Scroll Rack is activated afterward to exchange some cards, and they pass. Reaper plays a Plains on their turn. Farhaven Elf comes down, and the player grabs a forest from their deck. Lazav goes straight to the attacks on their turn, swinging the Spectre into the Reaper player. It connects, exiling a Nim Deathmantle off the Reaper's deck. In the second main, Lazav drops a Dwar Isle Refuge, gaining 1 life. They then cast Deathmantle and pass. I draw Blasphemous Act for the turn. I put another mountain into play, and then cast my commander, the Bloodfist of Keld. I move to attacks, and swing the Chick into the Krenko player, and Yahenni into the Lazav player, dealing 1 and 2 respectively. Krenko plays an Ancient Tomb, tapping their mana and taking 2, and then cast Gauntlet of Power. Fancy that. They do choose red and mountains. Back to the Reaper. A forest enters the battlefield, and then they cast Villainous Wealth targeting me, where X is 4. They steal Wayfarer's Bauble and Pulveros God of the Forge, otherwise 2 lands are exiled. They cast both the God and the Bauble from exile. Well, that blows. Over to Lazav, and they move to attacks again. This time, the Spectre comes at me, and I take the 2. Lazav then exiles Bastion of Remembrance from my deck, and I'm starting to wonder if I'll get to use any of my own drain and damage effects. In the second main, Lazav makes an appearance, and they pass. A mountain to hand for my turn, and a mountain to the field. I cast Atsushi to save off the Spectre, and for potential death triggers. I then move to combat and attack the Lazav player with Garna, Reaper with Yahenni, and Krenko with the Phoenix. Damage is good all around. The turn rolls over with Krenko at 33, and the Reaper and Lazav at 35. Krenko has another mountain into play for themselves. This is followed by Goblin Sharpshooter, and I become slightly worried about my board state being death-touched pinged to death. Their commander Krenko comes down afterward, followed by Ashnod's Altar. My worry starts increasing. Over to the Reaper player. They cast their commander, King of the Pumpkin Patch. When it enters, Pulveros triggers and deals 2 damage to their opponents. Lazav's turn has them straight to combat again, swinging into the Krenko player. The 2 damage is good from the Spectre, and they exile the Sword of the Parents off the top. Well, a combo piece, isn't it? Lucky pull. In the second main, they cast my Bastion of Remembrance, gaining a 1/1 human soldier creature token when it comes into play. Bojuka Bog then enters, exiling the Reaper's graveyard. Sulphurous Mire comes to my hand for the turn, and I drop it to the table. I then hardcast Shriekmaw, and when it enters, I destroy the Goblin Sharpshooter. Unfortunately, Lazav then becomes another Sharpshooter, and is activated to deal 1 to my Cutthroat. In response, I sacrifice the Shriekmaw, which unfortunately also untaps the Sharpshooter. Once resolved, the Sharpshooter is activated again to ping me in the face. After Garna and Zulaport resolve once on their triggers, I sacrifice Zulaport themselves, and triggers happen again while Lazav becomes my old Cutthroat. I take another sharpshooter ping, Garna and Zulaport damage and drain, and finally Yahenni gets their counter. Moving to combat, I assign Garna and the Angry Bird both into the Lazav player. The soldier token blocks Garna, but the Phoenix deals 1. The token dies, adding to Yahenni's power. To the mob boss, a mountain hits the table, and they cast the mighty Terror of the Peaks. However, before I can hit the field, it trips a rift by getting countered by a timely counterspell from the Lazav player. The Krenko player activates Scroll Rack in response, but seemingly finds nothing. Terror of the Peaks gets countered, and Lazav Port drains the table. Blasphemous Act is then next to the stack, and so I decide to sacrifice my field of creatures, except for Yahenni. I deal 2 damage to my opponents, and exile the top 2 cards with the trigger from Atsushi. Unfortunately though, Lazav becomes the Dying Dragon. I get Inferno Titan and Ravenous Chupacabra into exile, and the board is wiped away except for Yahenni. The stack then goes to resolve. Yahenni becomes a 10-10, Lazav gets 3 treasure, and Lazav's opponents get drained for 2. Moving to the Reaper player, they cast a Rampant Growth, grabbing a mountain and putting it into play tapped. Yavi my Elder comes down, and Porphyros deals 2 damage. Wayfarer's Bauble then gets cracked, and they grab another mountain from their deck. Lazav's turn has them cast Memory Plunder, which allows them to recast Krenko's Blasphemous Act. Unfortunately, this destroys Yahenni, hampering my offense. Yavi my Elder also dies, drawing the Reaper player a card. Altar of the Brood hits the field, and the Lazav player passes. Back to me, and I draw Rakdos Charm. From exile, I cast the Inferno Titan, and when it enters, I deal 3 damage to the Lazav player's face. I pass. Krenko begins their turn by activating their Scroll Rack after a draw. They then cast Fervor, which is followed by their commander. Krenko is then tapped and activated to create a single 1/1 Goblin token. The Reaper has an island hit the table, their commander is recast, and Porphyros does the burning of their opponents. To Lazav, and they also recast their commander. In response to this though, I cast Rakdos Charm to destroy the Altar of the Brood, so they have less chances of copying dying creatures. The altar goes down, and Lazav comes down to the table themselves. An island hits the table for him, and then they cast Whispering Madness. Each player discards their hands and draws 5 cards, which is a welcome boon for me. Lazav gets Whispering Madness ciphered onto them, and Lazav triggers twice. They become a copy of the Noxious Gearhulk I discarded, and the player passes. I draw a Swamp on my turn and drop it. I cast Loyal Apprentice, my favorite of the cycle of lieutenants, and follow that up with my commander. I go to attacks, and the Apprentice triggers for a Thopter token. I swing the Titan at the Lazav player and the Thopter at the Reaper player. The Titan triggers, and I split the damage between Krenko's Goblin token and Lazav's face. The Krenko player quits in response. Combat damage is good otherwise, and Lazav drops to 15, and the Reaper goes down to 24. In the second main, I cast Skull Clamp, and once it's in play, I equip it to the Thopter token, drawing myself 2 cards, while dealing 1 to my opponents. Time for the Reaper's turn, and they summon a Heap Doll. It's a Scarecrow, so the king gets to trigger, along with Porphyros. Unfortunately, Garna is the target of the Squash Wrath, and they hit the bin after the Reaper's opponents take 2 damage. The player then casts their own Cipher spell, it being Stolen Identity. They make a copy of the king, which gets sacrificed but does trigger the original. Porphyros also triggers and does the burn, while the king triggers and kills my Titan. I just can't have nice things. Lazav changes into the Dying Inferno Titan, and a Frontier Bivouac hits the field. Muldrifter is then evoked, and the Reaper player draws 2 cards, and we get burned again by the God of the Forge. They move to combat and swing their commander my way. I chump it with the Apprentice, and they go down. Lazav's turn has them cast Consuming Aberration, and it comes into play as a 20/20. In combat, they swing the Titan, dealing 3 damage to the Heap Doll, destroying it. Otherwise, the Titan is heading into me, and I take 6. On connection, they get to cipher the Whispering Madness, and we discard and draw 5. In the second main, Lazav drops a Gear Rage Sanitarium. My turn draws me a Feed the Swarm. I play a mountain, and cast Terror of the Peaks. It resolves, and I equip it with Skull Clamp. I then cast Feed the Swarm on the Consuming Aberration. Unfortunately, this gets countered by Lazav using Hinder. Aberration triggers, and their opponents mill 3 cards each, and the turn ends with the Aberration being a 41/41. Reaper's turn sees them cast a Changeling Berserker. Triggers go on the stack, and the king gets championed back to the command zone, after selections are done anyway, and the aberration eats the king trigger. The Bastion triggers for the Lazav player, and they drain the table for 1 while gaining 1. 2 combat, and the Reaper player sends their Berserker at the Lazav player, dealing 5 and dropping them to 2. Back to Lazav, and they go straight to attacks. They swing the Lazav Titan at me and burn away my Terror of the Peaks. I do gain 2 cards, but I lose the dragon, so fair trade? Don't know. Lazav then becomes the Dying Dragon, and before damage, Lazav casts Murder on the Changeling Berserker and they go down. Otherwise, I take the 6 damage in combat and drop to 8. The Cypered Whispering Madness is then cast again, and I lose the new cards I drew and draw 5 new ones. Frankly, I do like this hand better though. In the second main, Fathom Feeder comes down for the Lazav player, and the Not Quite Terror triggers to deal 1 damage to me. I draw a Stormfist Crusader on my turn, another fave card of mine. I then cast Junji, the Midnight Sky. I figure that I can instant kill the Lazav player by using Bedevil to kill Junji if needed, but I hope the Reaper player will do it. I tense up and pass with mana up to do so. Over to the Reaper player, and I hold my breath. Avenger of Zendikar hits the stack, and my hope evaporates. Luckily, Lazav comes to the rescue with a Psychic Strike, and the spell is countered. Wood Elves then hits the field, and the god does the burn. The Reaper player gets a land, and the Lazav player is burned out of the game. Farseek is then cast, and they grab a swamp. A Forest then hits the field for their land for turn. Back to me, and I have a plan. I draw Mogus for the turn, and cast Torbran. I follow that up with Jadar, Gulcor of Nephalia, and go to combat. Entering combat, I return the Flame Lake Phoenix from my graveyard to the battlefield, and swing Junji and the Phoenix at my opponent. This attack deals 9 damage thanks to a little bit of boost from Torbran and the Phoenix interacting. In the second main, I equip the Skull Clamp to Junji. At the end of turn, I gain a zombie token with Decayed. If I can make it 1 more turn though, victory is in sight. Back to my opponent, and Opulent Palace comes down for the player. They then cast Mirror Battlesphere, and the game is theirs when it enters play. Good game to my opponents. I really like this version of Garna. It rewards you for being all-in on the aggro strategy while also having an aristocrat backup plan and board wipe punishment. Not to mention, if your stuff gets killed in combat, they get replaced more or less. For an uncommon, this card is awesome. Considering how many of my burn and drain sources were stolen this game, I think the deck also did fairly well, considering those drawbacks. Thank you for tuning in to another casual commander game here on Dirtle Magic. See you next time.